Hello and welcome back, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, to another reading of Quirk, Class Thaumiel. Today I'll be reading Chapter 17 and Chapter 18. Here's Chapter 17, putting the apprehension in Quirk Apprehension Test. Here's the summary. Izuku's first day at UA goes just like you'd expect, but worse. There is a minor trigger warning for injury in this chapter, and some slight gore. "Aizawa-san, please, whatever you do, you need to expel that kid," Yagi begged. Yagi had approached his colleague in the break room after the others had all left to prepare for the first day. Before he could get a chance to slip away and take a power nap in his cocoon, Aizawa's ears were being assaulted by the dollar store Johnny Bravo. "Wasn't it you who chided me last year for expelling a class?" Aizawa retorted dryly. That's a different situation altogether, and you know it," Yagi huffed indignantly. "That class could have been wonderful heroes, but Izuku Midoriya will do no such thing. I'm telling you right here and now, that boy is bad news." Aizawa rubbed his temples and sighed deeply. After a moment, he responded with, "Fine, but only because you covered for me during the umbrella incident, okay? After this, we're even." "Hardly a fair trade," Yagi said from the corner of his mouth. "You want me to expel the heckin' kid or not?" the dark-haired man retorted. When his colleague made no move to answer, he climbed into his sleeping bag and began the long crawl to his classroom. When Aizawa reached the door to Class 1A, he didn't get the shocked expressions or exclamations of, "Why is there a hobo in here?" or, "Ah, it's a giant caterpillar! Quick, hide your leaves and strawberries and slices of pie!" Instead, he was met with a room full of students panicking far before he arrived. First, he noticed one boy in the back corner of the room, Bakugo Katsudan or something, holding his sparking hands in front of himself defensively, as if saying, "Don't come closer or I'll explode." Next was another dozen students congregating near the back left corner of the room. Weirdly enough, that French-looking student, another one who looks like a crow, and Endeavor's kid were sitting calmly in their seats despite all the chaos, but Aizawa didn't want to get into all that, honestly. "What's going on?" Class 1A's teacher gravelly voice asked, causing most of the class to turn and look at him, all shooting him the familiar looks of fear and apprehension he was expecting. "Aizawa-san, Sensei, a classmate fainted and we were simply trying to resuscitate her as outlined in the student handbook." Tenya Ida, also known as Aizawa's godson, answered. "That's in the handbook? It feels really specific, but honestly, I trust Tenya to know better than myself." "Well, it's time for a Quirk apprehension test, so put your books away and head down to the sports field." With that, the teacher walked over the still unconscious girl and lifted her up, slumping her over his shoulder as he walked, sleeping bag discarded. Passing by the still speechless class, he caught sight of a boy with a mop of green hair, watching the proceedings guiltily. "So this is the boy I'm meant to watch out for," Aizawa thought to himself. "He doesn't look like much up close, but clearly he did something to make this girl faint in the 10 seconds I was late, so maybe Yagi has a point." Izuku rushed to throw on his gym uniform and meet his classmates outside. He fumbled getting his arm into his sleeve, mind still racing with the events that transpired at the start of class. Izuku hadn't done much, just walk in the door and greet the couple friends he had met earlier that month, but before he even finished introducing himself to the uptight boy with glasses, the girl who had saved him from the shrapnel during the exam passed out at her desk at the sight of him. "I hope she's all right," Izuku thought to himself as he fixed his shirt and ran out the door to catch up with the rest. "But we're gonna miss orientation," a girl's voice said from the crowd of students. Izuku recognized it as the girl from before. He was glad to see her awake and mostly fine, if not frazzled looking. When she caught sight of him as he approached, she managed to stay conscious. "This is a school for heroes. We'd only waste time spending it on pointless ceremonies," the teacher said in response. Turning to Katsuki, who was watching Izuku warily from the corner of his eye, he asked, "How far was your softball throw in junior high?" 67 meters, I think," the boy answered. "Now try throwing it again, and with your quirk this time." "You asked for it, old man." With that, Katsuki threw the ball like a cannon, explosions lighting up his arm and propelling the ball up into the air. 705.2 meters, the gauge on Aizawa's handheld device read. The class dissolved into a flurry of cheers and whoops. "This is gonna be fun!" a pink-haired girl cheered. Aizawa saw his chance and took it. "Fun, you say? Because in my mind, heroics are quite a serious business. Just for that, I'll be expelling whoever doesn't put their full effort into the test today immediately." Izuku might have been imagining it, but it almost seemed like the teacher was looking straight into his eyes as he said those words. Following their new teacher, the class of students walked past the softball throw into their first examination site. It was a 50-meter dash. Izuku swallowed. "I'm not that fast. What if I get expelled for this?" His fears came to rest, however, as he watched a girl with long black hair create a flippin' motorcycle and course across the 50-meter range, instantly blowing the kid with tape elbows' score out of the water. "That's right," the boy realized. "I can summon my friends for this test. This'll be a piece of cake." When it was his turn to go, Katsuki was his selected running mate. "Ch!" the angry teen scoffed, turning to face the finish line. Despite his aggressive posture, there was a slightly pale tint to his skin and a barely perceptible twitch to his fingers. "I'm gonna beat you, freak," Katsuki growled. Izuku shrunk in on himself. Not if I catch my train first," the boy yelled back, running in the opposite direction of the goal. "What the flip?" Katsuki swore, turning to his teacher. Aizawa only shrugged as if to say, "Don't look at me, I'm just the teacher." Seeing his chance to twist the results as he wanted, he watched the boy run away from the starting line. Aizawa yelled, "Go!" and quickly hit his stopwatch, but just as the words left his mouth, actually, no, before he had even begun to speak, Izuku stepped out of thin air and onto the finish line. "What? But I thought, then where'd the green kid go?" the pink girl from earlier asked. She turned to watch as a second Izuku Midoriya stopped right outside the door leading into the school. Then the class watched in bewildered silence as the screeching sound of a subway could be heard, accompanied by flashing lights throughout the school windows and a rumbling from below. "Please stand clear of the track," a disembodied voice said from the direction of the building. With that, the doors opened for the boy. Were those doors always automatic? And Izuku stepped in, the doors closing itself behind him with a mechanical whoosh. Once again, the noise and lights were there, slowly dissipating after only a moment or two. "Aizawa-sensei, does a negative time count as 0 or bonus points?" the remaining Izuku asked from his place at the end of the track. "What? When? How?" the teacher eloquently responded. "Oh, the train?" the boy asked, tilting his head. "That's the time travel subway. I figured, what speed is faster than time travel, you know? I made sure not to mess with the fabric of space-time, I swear," he finished, waving his hands in front of himself in his defense. Aizawa just stared blankly. "Time travel," he said dully, then abruptly turned on his heel and started speed-walking away from the group of students. Once he was far enough, he pulled a flask of some sort from his belt and took a swig, staring at the sky. Katsuki remained on his placeholder for the 50-meter dash. He hadn't taken a step from it since the race had begun. "What the heck? That's an awesome power!" A boy with bright yellow hair, Izuku thought his name was Kaminari, piped up. The rest of the students were quick to follow suit, offering their praise and congratulations. "What a mad banquet of darkness," a boy with a crow quirk said. "Your splendor almost outshines even yours truly's," some French kid said. "Well, I think it was reckless to meddle with the laws of nature like that," a boy with peppermint-colored hair said. "Hey, I lost my wallet 3 years ago. Could your Quirk help me find it?" a girl with audio jacks hanging from her earlobes asked. Okay, it wasn't exactly praise, but Izuku was happy to take what he could get. After years of bullying and criticism, it was nice to finally have kids not fear him for his power. "Are we done here, or do you need more time to babble?" the teacher's voice asked, returning from his isolation. "I'm done with my coffee. So how about we see how well your time travel train helps you with a long jump?" "Hey!" Katsuki called out. "I still haven't run my 50-meter dash. Are you blind or something?" Aizawa sighed. "Fine, run your race." He got 4.13 seconds. Scowling, the blonde boy stomped off to the long jump track. To the collective disbelief of Aizawa and Class 1A, Izuku proceeded to summon a wide variety of objects and creatures for all the remaining tests. These included an ordinary-looking pogo stick that launched Izuku hundreds of meters into the air during the standing long jump and turned him into a mere blur for the repeated sidesteps, a taxi cab that appeared from thin air, making its way in loops around the distance run until Aizawa, exasperated, declared the test over, and a jacket which, when worn, sprouted muscular adult arms from the sleeves. Izuku used this jacket for the grip strength test, as well as the seated toe touch, the muscular arms replaced by tentacles that stretched the full length of the gym. Keeping the jacket on, Izuku walked with the rest of the group towards back to the exam starting point, the softball throw. His classmates walked with him, eagerly discussing their performance with each other. Gone was the somber mood from before, when the possibility of being expelled was announced. One student, however, wasn't taking place in the cheery atmosphere like the rest. Momo Yaoyorozu had been watching Izuku's performances, and as time went on, she felt more and more dissatisfied with her own performance. Here was another student with a quirk much like her own, but with none of the limitations. He created several large objects without much effort, only tiring slightly. The things he summoned didn't even follow the laws of physics. It was like staring at a perfect, unattainable version of her own quirk. Yaoyorozu envied the boy, although she didn't say it aloud. Reaching the softball throw, the students lined up and began their pitches. Izuku was surprised at the creativity some of the students showed with their quirks. The boy with electric hair, Kaminari Denki, used his quirk to shock his arm, stimulating his muscles for an extra strong toss, for example. Then there was Uraraka Ochako, who earned her score of infinity by removing the gravity on her softball and causing it to fly into space. Finally, Izuku watched as Yaoyorozu conjured a cannon. Her ball went flying, earning her a score that topped Katsuki's by a whopping 102.7 meters. Izuku stepped into the ring, ready to take his turn. A new arm appeared from the sleeve, a lean and muscular arm with a talent for baseball. Winding up for a throw, Izuku felt a ringing sensation on the back of his head, almost like he could feel someone's eyes on him, but cranked up to 100. "You're over-relying on your quirk. You need to learn that no power is infallible." Aizawa started, but was cut off by a sudden scream of pain. With a horrible tearing and crunching sound, the jacket fell from Izuku's shoulders, his arms consumed. Izuku was left standing in a pitching stance, only nubs of his arms remaining. The skin had been twisted into a knot at the ends, slowing the bleeding to a drip by stretching and deforming what remained of his limbs. Breathing heavily, it took the boy a moment to regain his composure. His classmates screamed in unison. Uraraka puked, and very nearly lost consciousness once more, but managed to hold on. Each one of the students panicked, but none dared to approach the boy. Some of the more capable hero students had taken first aid training and CPR classes prior to UA, but none were prepared for an injury of this magnitude. Aizawa had no such hindrance, as he immediately ran to the boy and was about to touch his arms but thought better of it. "Redacted!" Aizawa swore, his hair flopping down into place over his eyes once more as they ceased their red glow. "Did my quirk do that? Redacted, kid. Let's get you to recovery girl, now." "I'm fine, Sensei. It's really not a big deal. My friends haven't hurt me like this before, only ever by accident, so it's probably my fault, really." The boy rambled, apparently not distressed about the thought of losing half his limbs, even slightly. "Shut up and start walking," the teacher ordered, tugging the boy by the shirt towards the school. "We're gonna go see recovery girl. She's been keeping that chair of yours in her office, and the sooner we get you into it, the better. I don't care how often you lose limbs. You need medical attention, and now." Although Aizawa's voice left no room for argument, Izuku sure tried. Planting his feet in the ground, he begged, "Please, Sensei, let me throw the ball. I don't want to get expelled. I just can't." The teacher paused momentarily, thrown off by the change of subject. Seeing his chance, Izuku continued, "If I can't throw the ball with my arms, I'll use my legs. If I lose my legs, I'll use my teeth. Just please don't make me give up on my dream of being a hero." For the first time, Aizawa really looked at the boy. There wasn't an ounce of deception in his eyes, only unfiltered determination. Aizawa was then hit by the sudden revelation that he was about to expel this kid. Izuku had never even had a chance. Talk about illogical. The man would have gotten rid of a kid with more potential than most pros, and for what? Settling a debt with Yagi? As far as Aizawa was concerned, that debt disappeared the moment he used his erasure to critically wound an innocent child. "You're not getting expelled. Nobody is. That was just a logical ruse." The teacher lied through his teeth. "Now will you please get inside? I'm already getting fired. I don't want a dead student on top of that," he finished grimly. Still determined to finish his test, Izuku held his ground. He was unable to argue further, however, as a roaring noise like an aircraft was getting louder and louder by the second. Kaminari screamed, saying something like, "A shooting star!" Upon inspection, he wasn't staring at his wounded classmate anymore, but into the sky. Aizawa followed his gaze to see what looked like a tiny black comet hurtling ever closer to the ground. Before anyone could react, the meteor slammed into the ground. The impact tossed the students and teacher back several feet, screaming as they were thrown. When the dust cleared, all that was left was a crater where the softball throw circle was. The dropped softball was nowhere to be seen. Looking to the sky, Aizawa could see the fast retreating dot that must have been the meteor, breaking through the cloud cover with the force of a jet as it re-exited the stratosphere. "Super Ball!" Izuku exclaimed, muffled, from his place on the ground. He was face down and had no viable way to pick himself up with his recent loss of limbs. "You came back!" Aizawa's reader beeped and displayed an error message. The teacher supposed that the Super Ball must have taken the softball with it once it left the planet Earth. Turning to his now face-planted problem student, Aizawa offered, "Congrats, kid. You somehow managed to beat a score of infinity. You've proved your point. Now, you're gonna go inside to the nurse's office even if it kills me." With that, he hefted the student onto his back like a sack of potatoes and ran as fast as he could through the open doors to the school. "It probably will, if Nezu has anything to do with it," he thought to himself as he ran. Shell-shocked, Class 1A didn't move from their places on the ground, trying to process the events that had just transpired. After what felt like hours, but was more like 2 minutes, Kaminari Denki filled the silence by announcing, "Man, I forgot to make a wish!" The class burst out laughing, their stress dissolving instantly. Wiping her eyes, Yaoyorozu thought to herself, maybe his quirk isn't perfect, and decided in that moment, covered in dust and clumps of earth, that she would use the tools she had and surpass Izuku Midoriya. That's the end of Chapter 17. The SCPs in this chapter were SCP-052, the Time Travel Subway, SCP-262, a Coat of Many Arms, SCP-677, the Mega Pogo Stick, SCP-1729, the Driverless Taxicab, SCP-1300, Liquid Surgeon, and SCP-018, the Super Ball. I'll be moving right on to the next chapter. This will be Chapter 18, Incident Report 1300-B14. Here's the summary. The Foundation report concerning Izuku losing some limbs. Incident Report 1300-B14. Level 5 security clearance is required for examining this document. SCP involved. SCP-8502, SCP-1300. Personnel involved. Agent redacted. Name redacted. Date redacted. Location: UA High School, Mustafa, Japan. Description: at redacted AM on redacted. SCP-8502 experienced an injury of a similar magnitude to that outlined in Incident Report 1300-B13. Despite the similar nature of these injuries, anomalies in containment did not display the same levels of agitation as they did in previous instances of SCP-8502 experiencing bodily harm. Agent Redacted, who was on the scene at the time and has been assigned to the monitoring of SCP-8502, theorized that this was due to the nature of the SCP-3396 ability possessed by an instructor at UA University also on the scene. The instructor, name redacted, has an SCP-3396 ability which can be used to erase another anomalous feature of SCP-3396-01 via visual contact. When used on SCP-8502, this apparently removed its ability to communicate with all other anomalies, as well as their inability to harm SCP-8502. It is recommended that, name redacted, be considered heavily as a viable containment method for SCP-8502. However, as a civilian, the involvement of instructor, name redacted, can only be used as a last resort in this case. Intake Report 1300-B14. Agent Redacted's first-hand incident report. He is not a normal classmate. Most of the civilians he interacts with do not comprehend just how much of a threat he poses to human civilization. Although some do, his personable nature fools even the most trained of eyes. For the duration of my time on this case, I shall make sure to uphold the mission of the Foundation and contain this anomaly post-haste. Addendum 1300-B14. Agent Redacted confirmed, via verbal communication between SCP-8502 and instructor, name redacted, that SCP-8502 was responsible for the disappearance of SCP-1300 and confirmed its current location. SCP-1300 is not to be retrieved until SCP-8502 has been contained to conserve Foundation resources. The SCPs in this chapter were SCP-8502, Izuku Midoriya, and SCP-1300 Liquid Surgeon. Sorry, it's a lot of text anytime there is a incident report or something of that nature. It's always a little hard to understand, a little hard to read, but this is important lore, so I couldn't just leave it out of the podfic. Anyways, thank you all so much for listening. I'll be back to record another chapter as soon as I can. So until next time, patch out.